Howdy freeze dryers, it's Brian. Welcome back to the Live Life Simple Kitchen, the new Live Life Simple Kitchen. And I'm really excited because this is the first recipe video that we get to do in the new Live Life Simple Kitchen. And the recipe video that we're doing today is a breakfast skillet, which will kind of mimic the Mountain House breakfast skillet. Obviously ours will be much better. And then I'm gonna rehydrate it in a real world scenario because I'm going camping out to Idaho. So let's get started on this recipe. So because we're mimicking a Mountain House recipe today, I want to check and see what the Mountain House situation looks like. I want to make sure that it's comparable, but I always want to make ours look better. So this one consists of some potatoes, and then these chunks I would assume are eggs, sausage, peppers, onions. So that shouldn't be too hard to replicate. I'm actually going to change it up a little bit. I'm going to use ham instead of sausage. And you can really see that they skimped on things that I like peppers. I'm going to add some mushrooms in there. Really, it's mostly eggs, mostly potatoes. And at 10 bucks a pop, I really just feel like this should be better than that. So that's what we're going to do today. And I just went ahead and vacuum sealed this, and then we'll revisit this at the end of the video. We'll compare it with what we make right now. First thing I'm gonna do is get our potatoes ready because they're gonna take the longest. Very light oil. If you can do none, that's awesome, or you can try some broth. I'm doing a very tiny bit of olive oil, as little as you can get away with. And I'm actually doing a combo. I'm not dicing it up. I'm doing a combo of potatoes, onions, and peppers. It's about 1 pound, 12 ounces of stuff. So as long as you end up with that same amount. And this store-bought concoction is mostly potatoes because we are trying to mimic that Mountain House version, which is mostly potatoes with very few onions, very few peppers. I'm not, however, going to skimp on the meat. I'm using ham steaks instead of sausage for a couple reasons. I actually like ham better than sausage. I know. But with freeze drying, ham also will do better because you don't have to cook it and then rinse it and get all the fat and stuff off of the sausage. So we're gonna wanna cut these ham steaks very thin. I'm using 24 ounces of ham steaks, and I'll zoom in here and show you how thin I want these to be. We want pretty small cubes because they're gonna rehydrate a lot faster. They're gonna rehydrate fully and a lot better. So that is a whole lot of ham. I'm used to making these recipes for a large freeze dryer, but I think the more ham, the better. I think we're all good. I'm gonna take a couple handfuls of greens to throw in there as well. And then I was lucky enough to find these wild mushrooms on clearance for 99 cents at my store, so I bought everything they had. So I'm gonna do 6 ounces of wild mushrooms. So I'm gonna dice these up as well, and then we'll kind of throw everything together and cook them. I'm gonna cook the eggs separate, I think, and then add them in at the very end. Now I'm gonna throw these wild mushrooms in with the potatoes so they get nice and cooked. Wild mushrooms, you definitely want to make sure that they are all the way cooked. But to me, this is just one of the many reasons that I love freeze drying so much. I was able to buy wild mushrooms that are normally $8 to $9 per pound, I think for about 2 bucks a pound. So we bought as many as we could, and people look at you a little crazy sometimes because you're buying huge bulk purchases, but hey, don't knock it till you try it. So let's go to our eggs next. I think I'm gonna do 2 dozen eggs because our other fixins that are going in with the eggs are probably gonna take up almost half of the entire cycle. And I'm gonna mix the eggs a dozen at a time and cook them a dozen at a time. Again, light on the oil, as light as you can stand. And then we're just gonna scramble these 1 dozen at a time. So our potatoes are about 80% done now. They're starting to get pretty soft. I'm gonna add in the ham so you can kind of mix this all together and cook it all together. Just a light browning on the potatoes. I don't think you want them crispy because I think when you rehydrate them, they're probably not gonna be the way you want them to. I did notice that on Mountain House, they used the string kind of potatoes. Maybe that's part of their plan. Maybe those rehydrate a little bit better. They probably do. They're probably a little bit smaller. We'll find out when it comes time to rehydrate. I'm gonna add these greens in at the same time. They just really need to wilt for a couple minutes. And I did mention that I went pretty heavy on the ham. You could definitely cut back the meat, but I think that this will probably add quite a bit to the skillet. And if you've cooked this many eggs together, it can be a challenge. Really the key to victory, I think, is low and slow. If you tried to cook more than a dozen at a time, I think you'd just end up with a burned mess. And while our second dozen eggs are cooking, I'm gonna just throw these all in a big pan so we can mix them all together and keep them all consistent, because I'm gonna use some dividers and kind of divide all this stuff up so we have a comparable product to Mountain House. Something interesting that I noticed too with the Mountain House stuff is that they did not use any kind of cheese on this breakfast skillet or breakfast scramble, which I think is a huge miss on their part, because cheese freeze dries well. I don't know if it's because it's too expensive, maybe, I don't know. But we'll leave it out on this just so we can stay comparable to them. But if you're making this at home, man, I would definitely throw some cheese in there. This would be the time to do it. Just sprinkle it on top of the eggs, just so they can all kind of melt together, and then keep it warm. And then when you mix everything together in this big bowl, then it kind of mixes all that cheese in with it too. Another thing you can do that will make your breakfast skillet killer, and just hold on, just bear with me for a second. Throw some cottage cheese in with your eggs. You will have the creamiest scrambled eggs you've ever seen in your life, and cottage cheese rehydrates pretty awesome. So try that. We're not gonna try it today, but try it in the future. You'll love it. All right, well, 2 dozen eggs is definitely not gonna cut it, so I'm doing a 3rd dozen now. You could probably even go up to a 4th dozen for a medium. I really just wanna make sure that we have the right consistency so we can compare it to the Mountain House. All right, we're all done, and you can see that I am probably gonna have plenty of space. I don't think you'd have any problem doing a 4th dozen. I'm going on to our pre-cut parchment paper from Freeze Drying Supplies. I'm gonna use these dividers, and that way we can cut them into 10 portions, and then we'll have an equal serving size. So we will definitely need a 4th dozen, because the 3 dozen only got us this far. 4 dozen, maybe even 4.5 dozen would fill our medium trays really nice. I'm gonna hit this with just a little bit of rub before I throw my dividers in, just because I think it'll give it a nice, just a little bit of extra flavor. All right, dividers in the 10 portion position. And we're doing a full cycle today because I really want to get a feel for the new medium. I haven't had a medium for a while. First, I want to get a weight on all of these. So it looks like about 1,700 grams is the average for each one of these trays. So make sure you take a minute to subscribe to our channel, Retired at 40, Live Life Simple. We do freeze drying on this channel. Also, make sure you click that bell while you're there. That'll send you a notification every time we send a new video out. That's Sundays at 8 a.m. for us. If you like the videos, if you like the content, let us know. You can do that by giving us a thumbs up, showing us that you like the video. And if you're curious about freeze drying, make sure you join one of our social media groups where we can answer any kind of question you can imagine. There's tons of helpful people on there, tons of old threads that you can go through. That's a Facebook group and a MeWe group. It's Retired at 40's freeze drying group. And you can also use this magnifying glass to search any old threads. You can search members, you can search topics, things like that. And if you want to find out about freeze dryers, you can follow our affiliate link down in the description. And there you can find out all the information you ever wanted to know about these freeze dryers. If you decide to purchase one, it sends us a small commission. It shows them that we sent you there, that we provided this information and helped you make it there. And that commission helps us with our social media groups. It helps us do giveaways. It helps us develop new products for freezedryingsupplies.com. We're really trying to streamline the whole freeze drying process, and hopefully we can help you do that. And those are all my shameless plugs for today. Let's let the freeze dryer get to work, and I will see you in a few moments when we have some freeze dried breakfast skillet. Well, you've got to love the medium for its super fast dry times. This took about 24 hours, and it actually should have taken less than that, but I forgot to close my drain valve, so I got an inadequate vacuum error, and it happens to the best of us. And a pretty amazing looking finished product. Our average weight now is about 1,000 grams per tray. And in order to match our 3.7 ounces for the Mountain House comparison, it's about 4 of these portions out of the 10 in the medium tray. If my trays were a little bit more full, I think if I would have used another dozen or dozen and a half eggs, it would probably be more like 3 of these. So I'm gonna bag up our test sample in the new Euro series of Avid Armor, and the next time I see you, I'll be in Idaho and camping. We'll test this in a real world scenario. See you in a second. All right, we're back. Good morning, and we are in beautiful Teton Valley, Idaho. And I've got some water heating up, and we're comparing our breakfast skillet from Mountain House with our own homemade version. The Mountain House version says to add 1.25 cups to their 2 servings. It's 3.7 ounces. Ours is roughly the same, so I'm gonna try the same amount of water. And our water looks like it's just about ready, so I'm gonna go ahead and pop these open. And I did rehydrate another sample of this breakfast, the homemade breakfast skillet, earlier, and I actually threw it back in the frying pan after I rehydrated it just to kind of give it an extra little zip, and it seemed like it worked really well. So looking at them next to each other, you know, very simple ingredients, but the Mountain House stuff has surprised me in the past. Every once in a while they do have a good looking meal. All right, it looks like our water is ready, so I'm gonna add 1.25 cups to our Mountain House. And we're gonna do the Mountain House first today. Make sure all the water is covering all of the parts of the food, and then we're gonna let this sit for about 5 minutes. After that 5 minutes is up, you're just gonna give it another stir. Make sure everything is coated with water. Make sure everything's getting nice and soaked. And then we're gonna let that sit covered again for another 4 minutes. We want these eggs, especially these big chunks of eggs, to get hydrated. All right, let's do our 1.25 cups on the home freeze dried now. This to me looks like it's gonna rehydrate a lot faster and a lot easier than the Mountain House. There's not as many big chunks, and we used ham instead of sausage. And you're more than welcome to try sausage in your own experiment. For this purpose, I'm just not. I think that ham rehydrates a lot better. It's also, I think that it would store a lot nicer than sausage over the long term. All right, so we're gonna cover this up. I'm set my timer for 5 minutes. We'll let this one do 5 minutes. In the meantime, I'm gonna taste test the Mountain House. Okay, our Mountain House should be done now. And I had mentioned that throwing it back in the skillet would be a good idea because you kind of get a soupy texture when you do this. And throwing it back in that skillet will kind of burn a lot of that extra moisture off and kind of give it that skillet look and texture again. And we can try that once we get both of these rehydrated. But what I want to do right now is give our Mountain House a taste test. Everything in the Mountain House rehydrated very nice. Those potatoes, I know I'd mentioned those earlier, they have a different kind of a shoestring type potato. Those seem to rehydrate really well. The sausage seems fine. It could have a little more seasoning in my opinion, but not too bad. And the sun's coming up now, so we have a nice backlit scene, but let's uncover our homemade. First off, you can notice a huge difference in color. Our homemade is very egg colored. The Mountain House is looks orange to me. I'm not sure if that's maybe a cheese type sauce possibly, or maybe it's just a spice. I would also encourage you on the homemade version, add your own spices, make it your own, because this recipe is a very plain kind of generic recipe. I want you to make it your own skillet. Everyone kind of has their own taste on how they want that done. But let's try this homemade version of our breakfast skillet. I like the texture of the eggs in the homemade better. It's more like you would make it on a skillet from scratch. And our potatoes, our cubed potatoes, actually rehydrated really nice, which is more like a skillet, I think. And the mushrooms are also a nice addition. So one last thing I'd noticed on the Mountain House, it does have more of a watery consistency. I don't know if it'll pick up on camera. The homemade, it actually rehydrates nice and fluffy like scrambled eggs do. This is less scrambled like, it's more of almost like a stew. And you can remedy that by actually just throwing this back into a skillet if you have access to one, when you rehydrate, and just cook it on low heat for just a little bit, just to burn off that extra water and moisture. And that'll help kind of take it back to that skillet texture that you want. It looks like it's time for breakfast. If you're gonna do this at home, I would really recommend adding some cheese to your recipe. Also add some spices, make it your own. That about does it for today. The breakfast skillet, something that always hits home, something that everyone can enjoy. It's easy to rehydrate, easy to make, easy to prepare. And we're off to the mountains to have some more adventures today. In the meantime, this is Retired at 40. Remember to live life simple. We'll catch you next week.